Welcome to the Financial Flossing podcast with Ross Brannon, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. Ross Brannon is a financial advisor who knows it's not just about your teeth. He helps dental practice owners protect and maximize today's cash flow to plan for tomorrow's cash needs. Find him at rossbrannon.com. On the show, he brings together experts to help dental professionals looking to make smart money decisions to grow their income, turn their retirement goals into reality, and improve their lives. And now, here's your host, Ross Brannon.
Welcome to the show. Today we have Dr. Tom Reed on. He is the owner of City Center Dental Group in Denver, Colorado, and is the co-founder of Dynamic Dental Ascension, a coaching and mentoring program for dentists who have trouble growing to the next level. Tom, welcome to the show.
Ross, thank you very much for inviting me on, and I really appreciate this opportunity to explore this awesome profession of dentistry with you.
Well, for those of you who are listening and not watching, you'll see that Tom is wearing a very ugly hat. He has the University of Georgia Bulldog hat on, and as a guy who grew up in Atlanta, I've been surrounded by Bulldogs my entire life. Now, Tom lives in Denver, but he shipped his daughter off to UGA. And while it's a good time to be a UGA fan with back-to-back football national titles, we'll just leave it there and say Tom should have shown discretion before coming on the show. That aside, Tom, tell us your story. You own a dental practice and a coaching group. You live in Denver and you're not from Denver. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it would seem rather nomadic in nature, but I've always been, I've got family ties to Colorado and my entire life, having lived elsewhere besides here since up until the late 90s, grew up basically in Ohio. So went to college in Ohio at Miami University, and then subsequently attended dental school at Northwestern University in Chicago. Went back to Ohio for a brief stint for a practice residency at Ohio State University, and then back to Chicago for private practice. And then ultimately, my wife and I decided enough is enough. And we packed up and moved to Denver in the late 90s. And we've been here ever since.
And you said, basically, if we're going to deal with freezing cold and snow, let's at least have mountains we can ski on. Is that what you
That's right. That's right. Having been put on skis at age 3, and that was sort of a prerequisite in my household, growing up, I was like, what better place than, Colorado for sure.
Well, you've got a couple of unique things to talk about here. So let's talk about your practice and how you've grown it, because you kind of take a little bit different approach than some people. And then we'll come to your coaching thing here in a minute. But so talk about how City Center Dental came to be, how you've grown it, what you've done.
Okay, that's a great question. I've always been an acquisitions person. I have a background in economics from undergrad days, and actually had a brief stint at the Kellogg School of Management while I was in dental school at Northwestern, and studied advanced level accounting and management, and then had to do a research project that involved a lot to do with managed care and insurance. And so I think I got a little brainwashed back then, and that was the only way to operate. And so the early part of my career was heavily involved in insurance dependency and knee deep in sort of managing and mastering the world of PPOs. And so I've always gravitated to existing businesses where that was in play. And when we moved to Colorado, I actually worked for a large DSO at the time and got my fill of that, and subsequently discovered this private practice opportunity that was actually a large group that had been in existence for the better part of 50 years at that point in time, that had serviced a large manufacturing base here in Denver. And so I bought in to that practice, to make a long story short, at 1/4 ownership. And then the other 3 shareholders in that group were considerably older than me. And gradually over time, as they retired, I just absorbed their patient base into the overall operation. And so large group practice, pretty heavily insurance dependent, and figuring out where to go was kind of a behemoth, but it was like, well, why not stack on more? And so we actually folded in an outside practice set of charts into that operation and grew it even more. And suddenly I had this, behemoth of a, 13 treatment room facility to manage, and you can't do that alone. So I've always, been sort of in the associate realm as well. And so I've probably gone through 7 or 8, maybe even double-digit associates over the years as well. And so I've learned a lot from that experience. And then here we are, fast forward 20 some years later since the acquisition of that operation, and I've been able to maintain a couple regular associates, and one has actually ascended into partnership as well. So go ahead. Sorry.
You talked, a lot of people, when they want to grow, they focus on marketing. Now, you're in a city or a city area, a metro area rather. So this may not be as applicable to someone if they were in a rural area, but maybe marketing wouldn't either. I don't know. But you talked about buying other, basically, in the financial services world, they call it buying a book of business. And You're basically calling it, in your world, it's buying a bunch of charts. So talk about, because I've never heard people using that as a growth model. It's always let's grow marketing. Let's push marketing. Talk about buying charts versus marketing and the pros and cons of each.
Oh, that's a great question. Marketing, I think in this day and age has taken on a whole new element and layer of complexity to it, which of course is primarily fueled by the digital platforms that we all eat, live, and sleep by. And so I think that's a separate entity in and of itself. It's something we do on a regular basis. However, that chart acquisition I did about, probably a dozen years ago now, easily netted probably 600 to 650 active patients, even after attrition. This was an older practice that was a couple miles away from our existing location. And that particular individual was just looking to retire and really had nowhere to go with the sale of the operation. The equipment was not worth acquiring. And so we were able to opt out on the equipment sale or equipment acquisition and simply just paid him a per chart fee. It was probably $150 or so at the time to acquire those individuals. And so what happened is we ran an open house and invited the retiring doc to come be a part of that and introduce his patient population to our bright, brand, beautiful, state-of-the-art facility. And in so doing, we were able to retain probably 80% of his patient base, like I previously mentioned. So that was an instant influx of people that did require a fair amount of upfront cost, or at least, acquisition cost to procure. However, that group basically turned into an infusion of activity into the practice, filled the hygiene schedule, as well as in turn delivered operative care to us. And to this day, I would still argue that was probably the quickest ROI for what it required, because when you look at acquisition costs today in terms of marketing spend and what basically you might have to invest to go through, advertising and pay-per-click formats, you're going to spend a decent sum of money on a monthly basis to hopefully get eyes on your business to then hopefully maybe turn into potential leads and ultimately butts and seats. Whereas I think we skipped those interim steps by just paying for those charts and the rights to those charts and inviting those people in who are already have that trust piece figured out with their retiring doc, and have him put the blessing on it. And next thing you know, we had an infusion of growth.
Do you think it was cheaper per patient on buying charts versus what it would cost in marketing through digital spend?
It could very well be, because, like I said, those patients were already primed to be active in a practice and weren't someone out shopping.
It's a much quicker
ROI.
quicker acquisition because you have to drip on those people to get them to come. And you got 650 today versus you might get 650 over 2 or 3 years doing it the other way.
Yes. Yeah.
How many chart blocks of charts have you bought from old practices in your career?
That's another decent question. Like I said, when I joined that group initially, I was a 1/4 buy-in. I took over one particular partner's book of business back then, and slowly over time was able to fold in the other retiring docs' books of business. Even though that was under one roof, it was sort of an eat what you kill or a solo group operation. And so we kept things pretty well delineated out in a profit center format. And so it was kind of like buying small solo doc practices and folding them into the group as I go. So it's probably been a total of at least those 4. And then, like I said, about 3 or 4 years ago, I did also acquire a second location on the other side of town. It's about 25, 30 miles away from our flagship location. That's a separate book of business, but is sort of an additional acquisition.
That's fantastic. So talk a little bit about your coaching program, Dynamic Dental Ascension. How did it start? What do you guys do? What's it all about?
Yeah. Well, it's the mastermind of my coaching partner, Chris Green, and myself. We are local Denver residents as well as practicing dentists. The cool thing is we've blended my acquisition style with his startup style and offer a strategic coaching and mentoring program to pretty much younger dental practice owners. We're really targeting docs that are probably in year 1 or 2 of practice ownership all the way up to perhaps year 10. And in that zone of time, you come across a lot of challenges that really probably in many cases may have been unforeseen. And so what we've tried to do is essentially set up a open forum. It's a group format. We meet weekly on a Zoom call that we record and they have access to, and we present content to them each week, usually a sort of a lesson plan format where there may be a specific topic. It might be marketing, or it might be associate incentives, or it might be HR related, or, the likes, and maybe an insurance discussion. And we spend about an hour, 90 minutes in discussion, and then we open it up for a hot seat format afterward that each participant has the opportunity to either share specific experiences within that context of a topic, or maybe there's something burning in their weekly routine that they need to solve then and there. On top of that, we also offer these guys and gals a one-on-one coaching call format with Chris and I on a weekly basis that they have access to. And so our goal is to try to help these folks full time. And like I like to say, always sort of the mantra of this coaching program is that I'm trying to help full time for what I deem as previous versions of myself. And that is, hey, I've been down this path along this paradigm that you're on, and I know what you're going through for the most part. There's going to be some things that we may come across that are new and unique. However, there's a good chance that in my little recipe book, and we've got some opportunities. And what I like about being paired up with a startup individual is there's some nuances and uniqueness associated with taking something from zero to whatever level we're at or trying to get to, versus folding in an existing operation where you've acquired maybe a going concern and a nice cash flow. However, there's a lot of baggage that's associated with, that acquisition piece that you definitely don't have when you start at ground zero with a startup. So, and we've hit both. We've got both types in our group, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah. So you're like, hey guys, don't reinvent the wheel. Use our life experience, our wisdom, and we'll help you navigate these challenges that you are destined to face. But instead of making the mistakes we made, we'll show you how to navigate it and not screw up, basically.
That would be a great summary. And unfortunately, there's really very little practice management and business training that is afforded in the dental school education process. There's simply not enough time
Very
to be
little,
truthful.
very little might be a little bit of a misleading statement. My understanding is there's literally none.
Yes, I believe there are some programs today that are a little bit more proactive than in the past. And I went into dental school probably underserved in the science and the specific nuances of biology and chemistry and so forth, because I studied economics in undergrad. However, even with my business background that I had coming in, I still felt underprepared for what lies ahead in practice ownership. And there was very little mentoring at the time within the profession between practice owners or folks that have lived in the trenches and understand intimately what it takes to run a practice. So we're trying to kind of bridge that gap. And I think it's gotten a lot better in today's day and age than ever before. There's a lot more collaborative effort in play to bring in the business side of dentistry and meld it together with the human side of it, or the trust and relationship side of it. And of course, the science side of it. You've got to have the hand skills to be able to do the trade on a daily basis.
Well, the challenge is, like, physicians are all in a hospital together, or they're all in a surgery center together, or they're all in some sort of facility together so they can brainstorm with each other. Dentists typically are on islands by themselves. And so unless there is some sort of group that creates some camaraderie, it's very challenging to learn these things without doing it yourself.
Very true. And, there is a pretty big push in our industry toward consolidation. The DSO world has come into play, and I think for good for the industry. We have brought on some tremendous growth in the world of business and practice management, thanks in large part to these types of entities coming in and streamlining the backstage elements of our profession. And I'm internally grateful for that influx. However, you're right; it's still very much a cottage industry, and there's a lot of individuals still in private practice on their own island, and forging their own path every day. So the mission of our organization was to try to bring some of that fellowship into the fold and into the limelight, and help, like you said, bring together these individuals into an arena where they can share best practices and better each other in the process.
Can you give me some examples of some success stories from your group and what you guys have been able to achieve?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I just got a note, this morning from one of our colleagues, thanking me. It's been a year since we started our operation, and he was just eternally grateful for the growth and ascension that he's had in his operation. He's grown his revenue by at least double digits as an acquisitions guy. So he is now in the strong hunt for a new location for this operation. He's had some HR challenges in the past and has successfully navigated through the turnover of almost the entire team inside of 12 months of his payroll. And yet he hasn't missed a beat on the revenue side as a result, which we all know is oftentimes impossible to do because this is a team game. So if you don't have a well-oiled team who's aligned with your vision and core values, you might slip, financially quite a bit. That's one example. I've got another example of a practice owner, not here in the same state as of Colorado, but out of state, whom I just recently visited. And she has really come to that realization finally that as many practice owners are, they're kind of in their own way. And so her growth has already been, she's gone from, well, let's see, she was hovering around 1.5 million net. I've helped them navigate into a more insurance independent format of their operation, and they're already going to eclipse 2 million in revenue this year, if they stay on track to where they're at. And that's having moved into a bigger facility. So they've taken on a bigger debt, service and obligation to build out a brand new facility. And she's doing this with the same team, same hours. And so they've already witnessed that level of growth.
What are the biggest challenges you see dentists in the 1 to 10 year mark? I'm sure there's different challenges at different time points along that time frame. What are the biggest challenges you see?
Ooh, boy, it can vary quite a bit. A lot of it, I think, has to do with HR, human relations, and really managing that level of complexity that it is by nature, and realizing that they need to have systems in place to help them facilitate that, because the majority of them are still owner operators. So they have to be clinical. So being able to effectively wear the clinical hat as well as the CEO hat, and doing the non-clinical role is a tough tug of war that many don't realize they're getting into until they're well into it. And so what'll happen is that their time management becomes very, very difficult. They're very focused on being clinical because that, butters the bread. It makes the money. But so they don't realize that they've got to carve out time for their CEO work, to work on the business. They're too busy basically working in the business. And so what you have to get them to understand is that they've got to improve their, of course, time management, and so efficiency. How can we be clinical and be super duper productive, and at the same time allow enough time to open up the laptop and really work on the practice and get those systems honed in that they can in turn then effectively delegate to someone else on the team to manage. What you don't realize sometimes is that your level of perfectionism that you're ingrained in with is sometimes the rate limiting step. And you have to be okay with sort of that 80-20 rule, or Pareto's principle, that what I think I can do at 100%, I have to be okay with at this point being 80% accomplished. And then we'll work together on closing that gap and getting that 20% finished out with some better systems and more efficient use of our time.
So I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, and I'd like to hear your perspective on it. In my opinion, from what I've seen, there's two opposite ends of a spectrum in dentistry, of practice owners rather. You have on one side what I call a lifestyle practice. In essence, someone owns a job. It's a very, very good job, but they own a job. And their income they have a ceiling of their income of some amount. And then you have a business owner on the opposite end of the spectrum, a business owner who happens to be a dentist. And their income is usually dramatically higher than the lifestyle person. They may not be in the chair that much. They may not work that much, but they're managing the business. I know people who work 2 days a week and they do incredibly well financially. And I know people who have like 5 associates and they do insanely well financially. And both of these guys are running businesses versus someone who has a lifestyle practice. Now, there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle practice. It's whatever somebody wants. But when you have people come to your group, do you see that like, hey, they're coming to the group because they're not a business owner. They may not want a lifestyle practice, but they have a lifestyle practice mentality, or they have lifestyle practice habits, and they're struggling making the transition to business owner?
Oh, big time. I speak for myself, even first and foremost, and that is I've gone through all of those iterations along the way. You have to stop and realize, okay, why did I get in this profession in the first place? And if you're transactional in nature, you're going to probably be better served by being that business guy and really just getting yourself removed from clinical care as much as you can and just build something that services your bottom line, and hope, and probably within that umbrella, you have practitioners and a team who is probably a little bit more relational or perhaps lifestyle in nature to help run the business. Because I truly believe at the end of the day, you have to stop and realize just how relational oral healthcare is. It's a very personal experience, and perhaps one of the most quote unquote intimate services provided in healthcare, where someone is wide awake for it the whole time. And when you're delivering that care, you're within their private space, basically in their face and in their mouth. So it's a stressful experience for most people. And in some cases, they might be quite embarrassed as a patient because of either neglect or some type of hurdle that they've never really fully overcome to get themselves into a regular schedule of habitual care. So, bridging that gap is a real art form. And I kind of live in both camps. I'm a practice owner. I co-own two, well-run dental practices here in the metro area. But I still get caught in the weeds at times of loving and enjoying the day-to-day engagement with patients and that relational piece that perhaps becomes a little bit more of that lifestyle, aura. And so finding that happy medium for me has been really tough. But you're right. You're going to see a pretty big gap between the relational person and the transactional or financial doc. And yes, we have we have them all in our organization, in our coaching program.
If you look in the mirror and you find yourself of more of a lifestyle practice and you want to grow a business and you need to make the transition, what's the first step you would recommend to somebody?
Sure. Oh, I think what you have to realize first and foremost is that there's a brand that practice has created for itself, whether you've forced it or not. And so there's something valuable that or some type of element that practice has that it's bringing to the marketplace. Identifying what that is could be the type of care that it provides. It could also be the overall patient experience that practice delivers. Maybe it's a very boutique practice, or it could be even a more of a holistic approach to healthcare. Whatever that may be, that's created this healthy dental practice. Okay, is it being marketed properly? Is it something that you could grow enough in the base and the demand for that you could escape the chair by and replace yourself with someone of equal or greater capability, such that you've now replicated it and expanded it, and then you've freed yourself up to be more of that CEO type? And then is it repeatable? And then how many times over can you repeat that that model and still maintain a profitable business? It's kind of a high fixed cost business, no matter how you look at it. Dentistry is. And so there's a threshold that you have to sort of know where you're at, what's your break even each month. And so the profitability really doesn't start to come until you've eclipsed that break even point. And it, of course, is going to vary from one practice to the next, depending on the style of an approach that they have to oral health care. So I think you have to identify those factors first, and then you have to identify within yourself, like, do you have the propensity to be a good leader and lead by example? And if so, great. If not, you need some sharpening of that saw. That's when you go back to school on yourself.
That's good wisdom right there. As we wind down here, how can someone learn more about the Dynamic Dental Ascension program?
First of all, I'm a very approachable individual, so I'll just say you can certainly email me or text me if you have direct inquiries, and I'll be happy to share that contact info.
Now, I know it's relatively new. Is there a website or not?
Yes, that's what I was getting to. Sorry. Our website is www.dynamicdentalascension.com. It's a mouthful.
Yeah. And so tell people, if they want to reach out to you directly, what's the email and what's the phone number? And say it twice.
The email address is dr.tcreed@gmail.com. That's dr.tcreed@gmail.com. or I can be reached by cell phone at area code 303-906-4788. That's 303-906-4788. I'm on Instagram.
DentalAscension.com.
Yep. And once you type it in, it's pretty easy to find. And you can also reach us directly on there and set up a strategic coaching call or an inquiry call at that point.
That's great. Any last tidbits or advice you would want to give?
Yeah, I'd just like to tell everybody you're going to go through ups and downs. This is a marathon of sprints. If you really want to know my honest opinion, been at it almost it's been 28 years of private practice, and I feel more energized today than ever before because I think the profession keeps evolving, and it's evolving at a clip that is unprecedented than ever before. And it's awesome because we're bringing in technology and all these amazing upgrades to an age-old process. It's still a business that's predicated on trust, and that's because these patients are basically coming to you mostly out of word of mouth referral when you boil it down at the end of the day. And so you have to understand that you're in the business of trust more than you are the business of drill, fill, and bill. And if you get that concept down, I think the rest gets a lot easier from there. Got to have fun too.
That's great. Well, Dr. Tom Reed, I appreciate you coming on. This has been quite a educational conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little insight with your audience.
You've been listening to the Financial Flossing Podcast with Ross Brannon.
This has been another episode of Financial Flossing with Ross Brannon, guiding dental professionals to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. For more on Ross Brannon, visit rossbrannon.com.
Ross Brannon is a registered representative, Coastal Equities, Inc., and investment advisory representative, Coastal Investment Advisors, Inc. Investment advisory services are offered through Coastal Investment Advisors, Inc., and securities are offered through Coastal Equities, Inc. Member FINRA, SIPC, 1201 North Orange Street, Suite 729, Wilmington, Delaware, 19801.